Am I back on my face?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Right. In a minute, I'll go back and do a bit of screen sharing, and we'll show everyone a few cool things that you can do with AI, or that I've done with AI that you may not know about yet. But first, I thought I would just tell you a little bit about myself, and how I got into AI and what it is I do. Probably about 9 years ago now, I have a friend called David who's deep into kind of computer game stuff. He's an investor into computer games and was one of the first employees at EA Sports. And I was meeting up with him because I was running a property development company. And I started telling him about some of my ideas, and he was thinking about investing in one of the businesses. And he said, I'm not actually going to invest in this, even though I think you're doing really great, because of this thing called AI. And I was like, what is that? What's this thing called AI? And he sort of told me a little bit about it and sent me a PDF, which was kind of all you could really find about AI at the time. And the PDF told me about this thing that was coming, this computer that was learning, and it was kind of like the Terminator in those films in the 90s. And I just thought, this is kind of crazy, but it got through to a few things and showed me the rate of learning that the computers were doing 9 years ago. And that chart for me that I saw made me realize, oh, this is why David's not investing. And his thesis was, to me, felt entirely negative. And he was saying that as a result of AI, I don't want to invest in property because I feel like there's going to be a crash in the housing market because of the loss of jobs, and everybody's going to have this thing called universal basic income to be able to support everyone. And I got a little bit scared, which I think is the normal feeling you get when you hear about some of those things from AI. And as a result of that, I still run that property company, but I also started, and I trained as a plumber, and I started a plumbing and heating business, which I now run and have a few guys working for me there. But becoming a plumber was not on my radar. I was not a particularly practical person. I could do a few bits of DIY, but becoming a gas engineer was a little bit out of the realms. But I thought it's going to be a long time before a robot or AI is going to be able to fit a gas boiler or repair your leaky tap. So that's how I kind of got into AI. And since then, I've been following it and learning about it. And now I run a podcast called AI for Everyone, which is just a basic rundown of the last week's news of AI and what's been going on in non-techie chat. As you can tell, I'm not going to be giving techie chat myself. I'm going to be giving more like geezer plumbing chat about AI. But I've been looking at it for quite a long time, and Matt asked me if I could just share some of the things that I've been learning about and speaking about on the podcast. So I'm just going to give you like a couple of ideas or a couple of things that have been happening in AI from the last couple of months and where I see things potentially going next year. This is kind of like the highlights of the podcast for the last few months. So the first thing I think, which for me was the most groundbreaking of last year in AI, and how I think this is going to potentially move into the church and move into, to affect people who are like working in faith-based ministries, is to do with voice cloning and video cloning. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Let's just make sure this works. And I'll show you a couple of things that have happened or I've done recently. This is just a little voice clone of me. Now, maybe I'm speaking a little bit faster here, but this took me about 15 minutes to do this.
Now hearing is totally created by an AI clone of his voice. Everyone in my family found it quite shocking and also hilarious. You can write literally anything you want and it will come out in my voice like this. I have a lovely pair of coconuts. I secretly listen to Spice Girls very loudly. I know all the words. I like big butts and I cannot lie.
Okay, that last one, obviously, that was my children messing around, and they put that in just to be silly. But you can see how kind of incriminating some of that stuff could become. Now, this is the other one that I'd like to play just to see. And this is like a bit, I did this all for the podcast, so this kind of all talking about the podcast. Sorry to be, I'm not trying to drop the podcast, and don't listen to the podcast. I'm going to tell you all the best things about it now anyway. But this is me, this is Myles speaking now. This is not AI. Okay. So now it's actually me speaking again now. And you can see, I don't know if you heard the thing, I like big butts and I cannot lie. You can spend 10 or 15 minutes training this thing, and it can copy your voice and make you say anything, literally anything that you want. Now, again, it has the same feeling like, oh my gosh, that's so scary, which is what I was thinking when David told me about AI in the start. But if you really think about it, it also has potential to unlock huge possibilities for people who are struggling with that kind of ability to be able to bring their voice out. Now, I'll stop the screen share now for a bit, and it's me back here. One of the best things that I saw last year that AI is bringing is helping stroke victims bring their voices back. And it is researchers at the University of San Francisco and UC Berkeley developed this sort of brain computer, which sort of put a foil, it just looks like a piece of foil, over the top of a lady called Anne, who had a stroke. Anne had a stroke when her child was 6 and she'd been married for 8 years. And they put this kind of silver tin hat over her head. And what it did, it picked up little brain waves that were being emitted from inside of her skull. And this has kind of been done before. And there are, this sort of Stephen Hawking's voice that everybody is aware of is a thing. But the most advanced voice sort of, because he was operating with his sort of eyelids, I think, is why Stephen Hawking did it. But the most number of words that they could get out from people in Anne's position was 14 words a minute. Now, this new AI sort of technology that they developed is picking up the brain waves, and they will be reading Anne different words. When they would read a word to her, the computer would pick up a signal from this silver hat on top of her head. And they would read all different words to her, and her husband would read over and over and over the same words lots and lots of times, and they would do thousands of words. And gradually, it would pick up all the different brainwaves from different places in her head. Now, the reason why AI is being used for something like that is because there's so many data points. It's not possible for humans to be able to look at and understand all of those things in a short enough space of time to make it useful. But with AI, it's able to process all of that data super fast. And now Anne is able to speak at 140 words per minute, which actually is really, really fast. I think if you did that many words per minute, you'd be speaking super fast. But it has the ability to do that. And for the first time in 13 years, and if you want to go on and have a look, UC Berkeley voice recognition stroke victim, if you type something like that into YouTube, you see Anne and her husband having a conversation for the first time in 12 years. And without artificial intelligence and machine learning, that would have been totally impossible. One of the other things that I would like to show you, if I can manage the screen share again, is probably the next step.
Hi, this is not Myles Dhillon. This video was created by typing text into a keyboard with no camera, and anyone can create a fake video of you now, yes you, by just pulling your photo from Google Images. If you want to learn more, check Real Miles's podcast.
Okay, sorry, I stopped that because it's too much promotion of the podcast, isn't it? But that technology for me moves away from people like Anne and stroke victims, more towards the expansion, I think, of the gospel to places that have not heard anything about the Bible or anything about Jesus yet. And this came up in a conversation with my father-in-law, who is Nicky Gumbel. He developed the Alpha Course, and we were talking about how the Alpha Course is going to get to all the languages in the world. And they were talking about these long processes they were going to go through to be able to translate it, and they wanted to use sort of a transition from Nicky to a new host. And I was like, why don't you just clone yourself, do the video, and then it can translate it into any language that you like? And everyone's like, not everyone, but for the first time, some people were thinking, oh, is that actually possible? I was like, yes, and it's very, very cheap, and it'll take about 15 minutes. Well, to do the whole of the Alpha Course will take longer, but to train the AI model to be able to do a video of anybody speaking in another language, preaching in another language, it has the potential. And I don't know whether you have been really impacted by a particular podcast or speaker series or teaching series. Like, for example, Tim Keller, when I became a Christian, and Bill Johnson were a huge influence in my life. And their teaching was just like, it was transformational for me when I became a Christian. Now, say you become a Christian in a country where it's not possible really to listen to Tim Keller or Bill Johnson because you don't speak English, but somebody has cloned them and translated their talks into another language, and you get to look at the video because, YouTube is one of the most searched platforms or used platforms by young people. And if you don't have that accessible to people, it's going to be hard for them to be able to access those things that for us in the West, if you speak English, has made a huge difference on our lives. There's probably just like one or two other things that I would say before I hand back to Matt. And one is, I was thinking about this Bible verse in Isaiah, where it says, and I want to make sure I get it right, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing, now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Now, I know this could be the crowbarring of the Bible into a very strange context, but that for me makes me feel like, and I read that a few months ago, and it did strike me when I was really starting to push the podcast. I thought, actually, this could be a new way in the wilderness. This could be something that will bring streams in the wilderness. And part of that is God saying to us, forget the former things, don't dwell on the past. Now, I can sometimes go anti-screens, anti-internet. I really enjoy doing dark times where I'm not using the internet for any very, very long periods of time, switching my phone off. And I think there is a time coming where the computer and the screens is going to move away, and AI is going to start integrating with our lives in a way which will actually take us back to the pre-screen TV, kids on iPads scrolling the whole time, and will take us to a place where AI will actually really improve our lives in a way which doesn't involve looking at your screen the whole time, and potentially has the ability to expand the gospel into places where it has been unreached. Now, the last thing that I really feel like is really important to talk about when we're thinking about AI and the future is that it really learns from us. And everything that I've learned about AI and how it works and machine learning, it really is learning from us at the moment. It's scraping data off the internet all over the place. Now, the data that it's scraping, I'm wondering, if you look down at the human race and you're an AI, you can look at history that has taken place and you can see the Nazi regime and what humans are like. But in the same place, you can also see Corrie ten Boom or Maximilian Kolbe. And in the same place at the same time, those two things are existing. And what I really feel is very important is that it's looked at the past. It will be able to see that there are those two things coexisting in the same place, and that human nature has the ability to be evil and good. But if it looks at the present and it's scraping data from Twitter and people hating on each other, and it's scraping data from Facebook and people hating on each other, and scraping articles from the New York Times, which at the moment is contentious because they are at the moment suing one of the largest AI companies for scraping all their data and teaching their models on it. And it's going to be a big legal case. But if they are training their data on the New York Times articles, you know, do we want the AI to be learning the negative side of humans, or do they want to be learning the positive Maximilian Kolbe, Corrie ten Boom side of it? And so when I'm using ChatGPT, which I'm sure a lot of people have used, there was some research that came out that said using niceties and politeness like please, would you mind, could you do this, have no impact and actually can be negative on really good prompt engineering, getting the computer to do, getting the language model to do what you want. But I sort of feel like I want to always use please and thank you, which seems silly, but I want the AI to learn the good side of human nature. And if we're Christians and we want that to be part of what the AI is learning about, we need to try and integrate that into the learning models so that AI picks up on that good side of human nature.